right, Sandra, let's bring in Jonathan Turley, Fox News contributor and George Washington University law professor. So the unions argue that this employee buyout offer is a, quote, unlawful ultimatum. They wrote in part in their petition to the judge, quote, the Office of Personnel Management's forked directive is a sweeping and stunningly arbitrary action to solicit blanket resignations of federal workers. You can argue the stunningly arbitrary part of that, but what they say is true. I mean, Trump is trying to get these people to quit. He wanted 100,000 of them to resign. Some 65,000 have done so. The question is, does he have the legal ability to do it?
This is one of the most creative aspects of the Trump administration. It's actually quite fascinating because on the surface, it would seem like he does have this authority. I'm not entirely convinced as to the basis for this federal judge. They're saying, look, we will allow you to stay home. You don't even have to show up at work according to the current order for other employees. You can spend 8 months looking for another job, and then you agree to resign. That likely is within the authority of the president. His presidents often change the work conditions, hours, appearances of employees. So I'm not quite certain as to the basis for saying that it's unconstitutional. This is an agreement between the employees and the administration, a consensual agreement that they would resign if they could have those months to look for a new job.
Yeah, and this argument that Senator Warner was making was, how is he going to fund this? Well, as long as Congress appropriates money at the current levels, the money will be there to pay these folks through until the end of the fiscal year. The vice president, J.D. Vance, who's over in Paris for an AI summit, says judges are not allowed to control Trump's, quote, legitimate power. He said this, quote, if a judge tried to tell a general how to conduct a military operation, that would be illegal. If a judge tried to command the attorney general and how to use her discretion as a prosecutor, that's also illegal. Judges aren't allowed to control the executive's legitimate power. Now, you can say that, but at the same time, there were plenty of executive orders that Biden was trying to get through. They got blocked by judges as well. So what's the difference here?
That's right. And I think that this will all shake out with something in the middle, that you do have to comply with federal laws. You do have to deal with appropriated money in the way that it was appropriated to be used. All of that has to shake out. I think these federal judges, however, have gone too far. I think that they are really butting up against Article 2, the inherent powers of the presidency. And the argument that you're going to shut down the government coming from Democratic members because of these policies is curious. I mean, the Democrats are threatening people that want less government with shutting down the government. That's like threatening a vegan that you're going to impose a beef ban. I mean, it's not going to be particularly effective. In fact, it may be celebrated. So I think that much of this is atmospheric. So I think that what you're going to see as these cases play out is that these judges have gone too far. It does not mean that all of these claims are meritless. There are federal laws that must be complied with. But the sweeping aspects of this, barring all Treasury officials from seeing material, for example, I think is going to fall badly when it gets to review by the appellate courts. You can't sweep that broadly. The president has authority to run the executive branch.
Which, in fact, brings me to my next point, which is that Trump is urgently trying to overturn the ban on the funding freeze. Saying this in a DOJ filing, basic democratic accountability requires that every executive agency's work be supervised by politically accountable leadership who ultimately answer to the president. I mean, sorry, that's the ban on being allowed to see the Treasury payment system. But at the same time as that is going on, a judge in Rhode Island just ordered the Trump administration again to lift the freeze on funding. So how is all that, in your mind, going to shake out?
Well, once again, I don't see the way that a federal judge under Article 3 can limit Article 2 powers to this extent. A president is allowed to conduct an audit when he comes into office. He is allowed to slow down payments while he reviews them. It's well known that all administrations, including the Biden administration, often force through a lot of spending efforts right before they leave office. A new president's allowed to examine all of that. Now, does that mean that they can cut off funds that are appropriated for their specific purposes? No. It does doesn't. But they are allowed to look at how they're being spent. That is the discretion afforded to a president. So I think, once again, it's going to shake out. But this federal judge went pretty far. Now, this is a temporary injunction, so presumably the Department of Justice is going to come in and say, look, he's allowed to do this. This is how we're going to proceed, and we'll stay within these navigational beacons.
Yeah. Well, this judge in Rhode Island, I guess the spirit of his order was that you can't freeze all funds while you look for waste. If you look for waste and you find it, then you can freeze those funds. One other court challenge that Trump is facing is that a judge is now seemingly blocking some detainees from being sent to Guantanamo Bay. It's 3 Venezuelans. And this judge said, quote, the mere uncertainty that the government has created surrounding the availability of legal process and counsel access at Gitmo is sufficient to authorize the modest injunction. These Venezuelan detainees have not been told that they're going to Guantanamo. They just believe that they fit the profile. And some of the other people who have been in detention along with them have been sent to Gitmo, so they figured that they're next. So,
yeah.
I'm just trying to wrap my head. I'm trying to wrap my head around the idea here that a judge is saying, we're going to block you from sending people that you haven't said you're going to send to Gitmo.
Well, I do think that opinion is on very thin ice, if there's any ice remaining. I mean, first of all, you can send people to Guantanamo Bay. Democratic presidents have done that with people who have immigrated to this country, like the Haitian flood that that the administration was dealing with. The fact is, you do have to give them due process, but you can't assume that that's going to be denied. You know, the injunction should have focused on guaranteeing due process, not saying you can't transfer people from point A to point B. That's within the discretion of the executive branch.
Yeah, and we've seen plenty of lawyers showing up in Guantanamo over the years as well. Professor, always great to catch up with you. Thank you so much.
Thanks, John.
Appreciate it, Sandra.